Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast, bringing you a special birthday edition of the podcast for everybody's favorite 70-year-old, 50-year-old, white-haired Scotsman, Jason Neal, Patrick Harris, Johnston Yellen.
Happy birthday, happy birthday. Happy birthday in a hot car to us.
Thank you. To be clear to listeners, this episode is dropping July, 10? 8, 9, 10?
Sure.
Yeah. July 10.
Does that check out?
And my birthday was June 27th. So it kind of feels like my 50th is distantly in the rearview mirror. However, peek behind the curtain, we are recording June 28th because I am on vacation July 1 through 15. And my birthday is still very fresh to both of our minds on this 28th day of June. So thank you for your warm birthday wishes. Thank you to people who reached out on Facebook. Thanks to people who reached out over text. Thanks for people who sent in very kind birthday PDFs. Those were very much appreciated. The birthday faxes, remarkable, really remarkable. Really made my day. I've already framed some of those. They are on the wall in my house as I speak. So
that's awesome.
Thank you for the kindness.
Did you get my my birthday wish in semaphore with the flags? I did the whole Yep.
I thought you had sent the Raven. Oh God! Now I'm gonna have to go back and find out who sent the Raven.
Yeah, it wasn't. I didn't do the Raven. I did the semaphore. Yeah.
Semaphore.
Yeah,
Okay. Did you ask for help?
I did say
That's a Beatles reference. Now that I'm 50, I make Beatles references.
Oh, that's right. They say help, and they got the flags, the whole thing.
And here's the thing. On the Help album, they do not say help. They have not done semaphore for help.
No.
Because they didn't think help looked photographic enough. And so the person photographing the album cover just had them position the flags in ways that they thought looked nicely photographic.
For someone who doesn't love the Beatles in the way that I love the Beatles, you seem to have some really interesting deep dive Beatles knowledge.
Please note I have not said one thing about their music in the 1 minute I've been discussing the Eagles. not the Eagles, man.
Not the Eagles, man. I fucking hate the Eagles.
I've had a hard day, man. Anything. The Big Lebowski. Ba-dum!
Oh my gosh. There's going to be a number of people who have just heard the last 15 seconds of what we said, and they're like, yes, I know. They're speaking to me. And then there's going to be another camp of people that are going to think we sound like two presidential candidates who can't get through a single sentence. So, here we are.
It is somewhat freeing. I have found that to be freeing.
I got to tell you, the other day, and granted, like you had said, this episode is going live on July 10, but in later June, we sent out an email to our Single Cast Nation members, just letting them know about some of your travels around L.A.
Indeed.
And the number of people that reached out to say, firstly, like those in L.A. saying, thanks for coming, such a great time, so on and so forth. We got that, but we also got a number of people reaching out saying, well, shit, when are you coming to my town? When am I going to know when you're going to come see me?
Where are you going to be as opposed to where were you?
Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
That's it.
And so I wanted to use this quick opportunity to let those know, those listeners, nation members, non-nation members, and so on, to find out where we will be. First and foremost, you need to probably the best thing you need to do is sign up to be a member of Single Cast Nation.
Absolutely.
Which is super easy. Singlecastnation.com, and then go to the Contact Us page, and you just fill out that form, and you're now in our database, and you become a Nation member. And once you're in that database and you opt into receiving our emails, as we start communicating details of the trips we had been on, we're going to let people know where we will be in the future as that information sort of...
Yeah, as we know.
As we know, you will know. So please go ahead and do that, because I don't know about you, Jason. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but one of the things that I enjoy the most about what we do is being in front of people and sharing these
of course.
these bottlings that we've done, and explain why we've bottled this, and sharing that liquid with people.
Yeah, I might surprise you here when I say this, but I do not live for spreadsheets.
What?
But
Come on.
I know.
On.
But getting out, eyeballing people, pouring single cask nation, talking single cask nation, listening to other people's stories about their involvement with single cask nation, that's why we have always done what we do. I will also say we're involving Jess in this fun as well. So if you're an overseas listener,
Indeed.
be sure to sign up for the nation, because Jess will have a chance to say where she has been and where she will be appearing. And so, we're really going to try to communicate this. We want to celebrate where we've been, but we also want to let you know we're coming out. And we'll see you. And hell, if you want to see us, drop us an email, info@singlecastnation.com. If we can get 3 quality tastings put together, maybe we'll come to your town because of you.
You took the words right out my mouth. Exactly. Yeah, we don't have to be in control of our travel schedule. You could be in control of our travel schedule. To a point.
Sounds scary when you say it.
As has been our tradition the past few episodes, we've been incorporating some emails that have come in, sort of front-loading them ahead of our interview. And I wanted to highlight one of those emails, Jason, for you and for the listener. So I hope you'll allow, what am I trying to say? I hope you'll allow me to indulge me? No, to indulge you. Who am I indulging?
Yourself.
I'm indulging myself.
Let's be clear.
Seems very indulgent. We received an email from Nicholas Frangipane.
Indeed.
Frangipane. He was at a tasting I did last month or so, and we were talking about the various pronunciations of his name, and he did tell me exactly how his name was pronounced, and I think that is Frangipane. I'm near positive of that. Anyway, he had sent in an email on on May 4. As you can see, we're a little behind on some things here. And his question to us is, or the subject to his email is, how does whiskey move across the U.S.?
Does it move uphill?
You push it uphill. It's like water.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
So he says, Dear Jays, I think Joshua and Jason will both be experts on this topic, but the question might be too boring to cover on air. I won't be offended if you skip it. I almost didn't send it, but given your appeal for letters, I thought I'd give it a shot. I'd like to know more about how whiskey makes its way across the U.S. So here we go. People on online forums will often fret about the temperature of their whiskey if it's left in a car for a few hours, and others will sometimes reply that it sits in their truck for months, so a few hours won't harm anything. Those exchanges got me thinking about the way whiskey is distributed in the U.S. How long does it sit in trucks? What are the storage conditions like? How long does it sit in warehouses between movements? How are allocations to various distributors decided? Why is it sometimes one region of the U.S. seems awash with a particular special release, while other regions get much less? Can a distributor refuse a release from an importer that they have contract with? I'm totally interested in learning the minutiae of this process. Thanks, Nick Frangipane. P.S. Jason said my name right the first time I wrote it in. Joshua got it right the second time. Perhaps Jess could take a crack at it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of very good questions there. And I think you could talk at length about distributors and contracts and relationships. And some areas of the country get, like not quite flooded, but they certainly get, you see patterns, right? If you're paying attention, you see patterns. And so I think those are all great. And I think you can definitely answer that. I think there's an element of this rolls in with what we were discussing last episode, where we talked about neck pours and we talked about bottle shock and we talked about getting bottles to your house. And there are clearly occasions when your SCN bottle, as one example, comes in off the UPS truck and it has been in the back of a very warm truck all day. And we've said this previously, it's always worth repeating. Set it to the side. I know you're excited. I know it's worth opening. I know you want to dive into it. Set it to the side. Let it come back to temperature. Let it calm down. Let it sit in your house. So I think that part is very real. I think the natural follow-up question is, will it have done damage or will it have changed that whiskey in some way? I don't have a scientific response to those questions. I think they're very worthwhile questions. I will say, having gone through cask selection, having gone through samples coming to, like our own samples coming to us in different ways, I don't tend to find swings in flavour profile depending on how a particular bottle came to me. So my anecdotal evidence is, if you let that warm bottle come back to temperature, you're probably more than likely 99.99999% getting the bottle as we wanted you to have it and engaging with a flavour profile as we wanted you to engage with it. So, I think there are real issues there. Another one, just if Nick is interested, is obviously when we were doing our bottles with the wax on them, putting out, let's say, our silver top bourbons. And some people, I know One Nation member in Las Vegas had reached out to say, look, we're in triple digits for 3 months here. Please don't send my bottle with its silver wax top during these months. And it was like, yep, heard. Absolutely. The back of a UPS truck was getting up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Like that's absolute insanity. Like shit is boiling at that point.
Yes.
Like that's...
Yep. Yeah.
Feel for your UPS drivers. So in the real high peaks of the summer, that was a wax issue, not a liquid issue. So
yeah, I think that's a good point. I would argue that you will run into issues when it comes to heat of wax cracking or things expanding, and so you get leakage occasionally. But it doesn't necessarily affect the quality of the liquid. And like you, right, you've got the samples at home, you have the bottle that comes to you, and you've got to do a side-by-side. You want to see the differences. Initially, sometimes the question is, well, we approved this cask for bottling in May, and it got bottled in July. What are the differences? What are the minute differences? But you also want to see, okay, was this in a hot car, and have there been significant changes? And we haven't found any significant changes. So that's a bit, it's anecdotal, but it's firsthand.
Yeah. Are there changes at the molecular level? Probably.
Yeah, probably.
Am I studying the molecular level? I am not.
From the moving liquid around the country on the distributor level, that there could be a few variables there, right? So we have some distributors who are heavy in wine, more heavy in wine than they are in spirits. And in some cases, they're using refrigerated trucks to ensure that their wine doesn't get affected, because wine is a much more delicate drink, right? And so,
sure.
Those bottles will be protected in some cases by refrigeration of those containers themselves, but it's not all of them, and so that tends to be kind of hit or miss. most warehouses that I visited, and I visited a number of our distribution warehouses from state to state, and they're all temperature controlled. So that's, again, because a lot of the distributors are not just spirits distributors, they're wine distributors. Or they're distributors that use a third-party warehouse that works with a number of distributors across different drinks, beer, wine, spirits, right? And so they've got to keep that temperature control going. So I think there's a bit of protection there. To touch on the idea of how allocations are decided, that's a deep one, right? So let's say we live in a perfect world where when a distributor takes on your product, the distributor receives that product and they sell all of the bottles to the retailers and bars, and then those retailers and bars sell through the product and are hungry for more. In a perfect world, you would just see the liquid or the bottles, just going in a perfect cyclical, order, all right? Bottles purchased, bottles delivered to retailer or bar go through those bottles. They need more. The next release comes out. The distributor purchases from the importer, and we go through that cycle all over again. The world is not a perfect place. And post-COVID, we've seen that it's an even less perfect place in that people aren't purchasing it the way that they were. When they used to buy 2 bottles at a time, they're buying 1 bottle at a time.
Yeah.
Or if they bought a bottle, one of each from a release, maybe they say, well, I'll buy these 4, but I'm going to pass on these 2 or so on, right? People's purchasing habits have changed. And so what you're dealing with now are distributors potentially being choosier on what they have, on what they want to bring in. Or you could do what we do, is we do our best to pre-sell a lot of these bottlings and work with the distributors to sell through some of the stuff that's sticking around, right? So it's this constant, because the system isn't perfect, our sales job is to help move all of those bottles through every tier of the system. So similar to what we were saying earlier on, we are pushing water uphill. That's exactly what we're doing. And so you may see some areas of the country getting a bit more because for whatever reason they've sold through their stuff and they want to take on extra allocation. Yeah. Or, I'm talking about this in broader terms, right? Not just us. But if I use us as the prime example, we're distributed in 26 or 27 states. So we're not in the entire country. So, there's reasons you don't see us in South Dakota or in Utah or in other parts of the country. So we simply don't have the distribution. And if we have a cask that has 400 bottles rather than the 200 bottles, well, you just simply may see more in Illinois or Texas or something like that, in a state that can handle more, right? So there's a number of different variables that come into play that help dictate why you may see more liquid in one place and less liquid in another.
And I think a further example here is one that I think we've covered in episodes since Nick originally sent in his email, which was me asking you, Connecticut. Right? You're in Connecticut, and yet not all single cask nation retail makes it onto shelves in Connecticut. And you'd gone on to talk about registration for labels and the cost associated with that. And so if you then start going state by state around the United States, you can find a whole bunch of intricate reasons for why releases make it one place and not to another, and why everything makes it somewhere and not everything makes it other. And so it's a challenge, right? It's interesting, it's intriguing, it often can feel like pushing water uphill. I also think one of the aspects I would add to your response there is as we're projecting allocations, where's the support, right, for single cask nation? And you find LA, you find New York, you find Chicago, you find the Boston area, right? And so those places naturally get a larger allocation than somewhere where we have a little less single cask nation support. So, but again, even with the best support in the world, sometimes the state makes it difficult. So I think about Seattle and I think about the state of Washington, right? Terrific support in Seattle. State of Washington poses some problems.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there's also cases too, and we'll wrap it up here. But there's the last question he had was, can a distributor refuse a release from an importer they have a contract with? And the fact of the matter is, yeah, for sure. Like a distributor, even though there is a distributor contract in place, a distributor is not forced to bring anything in. And so, A, they could say no. B, quite often when an importer or a producer offers allocations to a distributor, they have a certain amount of time to say yay or nay. And I've seen some instances where a distributor, the main purchaser happens to be on vacation, or they're traveling, or whatever the case may be, and they're not checking email, and they had their time and they missed it. And sometimes that shit just happens. And it's not just us. It's wine, it's other spirits, it's beer, like especially beer, a perishable product, something like that, right? So again, it gets down to there are a number of variables in place that help to answer the question. Nothing is cut and dry, nothing is black and white.
No, definitely not.
He wanted to know minutia. Within every instance, it's all minutia.
Well, I think this is the perfect transition into today's guest, who is a retailer, a store owner in the state of Connecticut, who's putting out legendary cask picks, who talks about their store being a destination. She's not shipping outside of the state of Connecticut. You want an Irene Tan selection? You better make it to Irene Tan's store. Canterbury Liquors is well worth your time, is well worth a visit. When I had the chance to finally sit down with Irene, it was on the back of you, Joshua, telling me so many stories about visiting her store. Oh, yeah. And Irene and I actually joked about, you go in to sell Single Cask Nation, you walk out with other bottles.
Every time. Every time.
Which is another one of those, like, if you set your store up to be a destination, if you find yourself there for any reason, let alone going there to sell bottles, you take advantage of being there. And so it was fascinating getting a chance to sit down and talk to her. I got to spend a few days in her company and heard the way she talked about blending, and heard the way she talked about cask picks, and heard the way she talked about the industry, and yet always talked about herself as a software engineer, right? First and foremost. And the whiskey was a hobby. And please, when you listen to this interview, it is clear whiskey is so much more than a hobby for Irene Tan. Yes. So much more. And I think she can be a little self-deprecating in talking about herself as a software engineer. But I loved the opportunity to sit and talk to her. I enjoyed her company. I thought as a person, she was simply great to hang out with. As a whiskey geek, I felt like I was talking to somebody very like-minded. I will turn it over now to the listeners. Enjoy Irene Tan. Good morning, Irene.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for making time to talk this morning. It's been lovely hanging out with you for the last couple of days.
Yeah, it's been a nice surprise.
I will say Joshua has spoken so highly about you for so long that to finally meet you
is really to meet somebody very special in this industry.
Aw, Joshua's too kind.
Well, you're known for your store.
Yes.
Is that Canterbury Liquors?
Yes.
Okay. Cool, because I know we've been talking about an original store and a second store, and so
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I got the name right
Yeah,
for you.
it's since October of 2019.
Oh, okay.
I had purchased Canterbury Liquors.
Okay, so you've been telling a great story this week about getting into wine, wine leading to whiskey, and then whiskey leading to your own store. Could you give us that story for the listeners?
Sure. So it was a while ago now, I think at least over 10 years ago, when I discovered too many bottles of wine in my basement. I think it was around 1,200 bottles. I remember going down to the basement one day, I'm like, well, the gym's in the basement, and then there's all these wine bottles taken over in the basement. So I said to myself, I think I'm going to need a store to hold. I don't want to have all those bottles in my basement. So that's how I got into partnering with somebody to purchase my first store.
And so I'm trying to get this correct, because you talked about building your palate as a wine drinker. And then that wine drinker came to whiskey. And one of the things that we talk about with people is if you can find flavors in wines, you can find flavors in whiskeys.
Yes.
However, you're making a step up in alcohol strength. And so I'm curious for you in your journey, what did that look like, and how did your palate adapt from wine to whiskey?
So the alcohol for me in whiskey carries the flavors, right? And in wine, I mean, you're just expected to, know it's got a nose and it's got a different things on the palate and the finish and all of that. And mouthfeel and acidity and tannins and stuff, which all of that does translate to whiskey. But for me, I was never a whiskey drinker, right? I was a wine drinker until 2014, and a few months after I opened the first store that I was told that was my job, to take care of the brown spirits.
Okay.
So it was all new for me. So when people, oh my God, you have such a great palate for whiskey and stuff, and I'm like, well, I'm still consider myself a newbie because I know people have been drinking whiskey for years, right? But I'm one of those people, and you've already that you might already have figured out that I never do anything half-ass. It's always 155% or higher. So when I was told to go procure whiskeys for the store, I was pretty much went all out. I was working in Massachusetts, and I still am actually in my day job. And I went to a couple of tastings every week after work, wherever they had them, and developed the palate really quickly. It was just a matter of, you still nose whiskey. Well, with the mini glens, you get to nose them the way I like to nose wine is to stick my nose in it. I learned very quickly that those were the glasses you should use and not the big ones. But also, yes, the flavor profile is a little bit it's same but different because of the intensity. In wine, I typically don't go take a small sip and then take a bigger sip, right? And that's one of the things that I developed really quickly is take the smallest sip to acclimate your palate to it.
Yeah.
And the second sip kind of swish around to say, hey, this liquid you're about to really enjoy is here. And the third sip is when you really get to enjoy it. So I think that's kind of how, for me, transitioning from wine to that was a method of tasting.
That's wonderful. That's exactly how Joshua and I do it as well. Even in a tasting, we will say to people, take that first small sip, coat your mouth, pay no attention to how it tastes.
Exactly.
Now go in for a second, and now by the third, you're layering flavors. Yeah. This is wonderful to hear. I am curious, as a wine drinker, did you have a particular set of flavors that you enjoyed? I'm thinking peppery, I'm thinking big fruit, and other flavors.
Yep.
And then when you came to whiskey, did you find yourself liking the same types of flavors, or did you move into some different flavors?
So it's a little bit different, right? Because the flavors in whiskey, while you can maybe find some of the most similar fruit and stuff like that, the flavors are different, but the one similarity, at least that I can think of right off the bat, is the green pepper note that I absolutely detest in wine and also absolutely detest in whiskey. It's okay in a mezcal.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Oh, okay,
Like
nice.
a tepestate or something like that, where there's a little bit of the vegetal note.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's okay because, it's made from this very vegetal, fruit. But with wine, I see it as a flaw, right?
Okay.
Because it's from unripe grapes,
Ah, okay.
right? So yeah, like Cabernet from Chile, I finally found one I can actually drink because somehow maybe it's global warming, but it doesn't have those notes. Or Cab Franc, typically, especially when it's a cooler season, people are still going to release those wines. Even higher end wine producers will, because we're still going to want to make our money, so we're still going to release it, even though it's not optimal in flavor and profile. But I suspect the majority of drinkers don't pick up those notes or are not opposed to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I call it a personal preference, I guess.
I love you identifying where the green pepper note comes from in a wine. Do you know where the green pepper note comes from in a whiskey? Or do you at least have an hypothesis?
Well, I think it's okay. So it's probably most prevalent in single malt whiskey for me, or blends. Well, mostly. All right, I'm gonna put myself out there. Mostly single malt whiskey that has been made with chocolate malt.
Oh, interesting.
And, yes, and it's over roasted. Some people get the coffee note,
Yeah.
and they get the chocolate note, which if it's done well, it can be quite pleasant. But generally, a lot of distillers who came from the brewing world, who use a bit of chocolate malt to make stouts and stuff like that.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not generalizing, but because I've met a lot of actually master distillers that come from the brewing world make excellent single malt that have no chocolate malt at all. but that's where I found it to be very prevalent, and to me, it's such a turnoff. It's like I don't care if that's a $500,000 bottle. I'm not drinking it.
I'm going to keep my eyes open for that as well and see if we can find some patterns in the green pepper note. It's not necessarily something that turns me off.
Okay.
I can quite enjoy that vegetal presence if it's then in harmony with other components.
Yeah, for me, it's just, it's like people that don't like cilantro, right?
Right.
And you can find it in everywhere, right? I can get a sniff of cilantro. Luckily, I don't mind cilantro. So it's definitely a personal preference for me. But having said that does not, if I had to judge the quality of a spirit, or wine, just because it has those notes in it, I personally don't prefer it, but I can still judge the quality of does it have, good balance, does it have good mouthfeel and all of that, minus the annoying note.
So as I was alluding to in your introduction, you are somewhat legendary, and your picks, your store picks, are definitely legendary, and it's now at a stage where if Irene Tan brings in a cask, it's purchased. There's no doubt about it. How did you first? Let me rephrase that. What were you looking for when you first got into picking casks for your store, and how have you seen that evolve in the time you've been doing it?
Okay, so for your comment about being legendary, I think somebody's starting rumors about me.
The good news about being legendary is you don't have to agree.
That's true.
It's up to other people to describe you as legendary.
So I think for me, it was always about picking. So I am known to pick barrels and casks that are not your norm. Right? Because, why do you need a barrel of something that just tastes so normal? You just buy the core products and get it over with. So I'm always looking for something unique. But, that's not the primary purpose of picking a cask, right? It's about finding a whiskey or rum or gin or whatever, because I don't, even though I am mostly known for my whiskey, I do love my spirits. So I dabble in all the other varieties and categories of spirits. Typically for me, it has to have the three components, right? It has to smell lovely, and then it has to have good balance on the palate, right? A palate that's it doesn't have to be rounded, because not all my barrel picks are rounded. It has to have a presence, an enjoyable presence. If you prefer something that's powerful, then some of my picks will sit well with you. If you prefer something that is just rounded without a kind of a punch in the face, some of my other picks will kind of also resonate with some people. But more importantly, the finish, right? So the nose, I will say, okay, you can't have the nose. At least you have to have the palate. You have to have the finish. So I'm looking for something that, ideally that smells wonderful, and it's complex on the palate. So you when you taste this whiskey, you're not gonna just shoot it back. So you're gonna taste over a course of an hour or so. That you actually, with every sip, discover nuances and it's like you're on a treasure hunt almost, right? It's like, oh, I didn't get it on the first two sips, but wait, by the fifth sip, certain things are coming out, and as your whiskey oxidizes when we have it in your glass, it's like there's a mystery that gets uncovered, and of course on the finish, you want it to stick around for a while, right? And just really kind of enjoy the every sip and every moment that you're sipping that whiskey.
I absolutely want to stay in the retail space, but I want to ask you a quick follow-up on that very topic of tasting and selecting and sharing. Josh and I talk often about context. And there's context with a selection. Then there's the context of a tasting. And you just said this a second ago. When you sit with it over an hour and it oxidizes and it opens, if you've got someone in your store, you don't have an hour with them. If you are selecting from multiple casks, and we've talked about, multiple samples being lined up and going through them, do you ever contemplate the contextual setting for selection and then selling?
So there's two ways that I pick whiskey casks and barrels. One is for my blending projects, we can talk about after.
Please.
And the other is for a selection for my store. Yes. So yes, while I don't have the hour, I already have the narrative for you. Say I have 6 whiskeys I want you to taste in the half hour or 45 minutes you're at my store. A good example would be this barrel of Mylum and Green that I picked a few years ago. So they've been sending me a whole bunch of samples, and I was not liking any of them because they all had the Dickel note, which is another note. There's a few specific notes I don't like in whiskey, and so all the samples sent me had the note, and I was like, So this will just come down to distillery then, we'll find something. So sure enough, I go down there, and Marlene Holmes had picked me up 4 really, really nice samples, fine examples of good whiskey. Younger and older, but they all had the same note. So I brought some whiskey with me that didn't have that note. I'm like, well, so this is a couple of whiskeys that I prefer to pick because they don't have that note. So they said, well, while you're here, let's go pop some bungs, right? So we popped the first bung, and that very first molecule that escapes from the barrel, three racks high, I'm like, nah, that's good. Dickel, put it back. And second barrel, same thing. The third one didn't. So I said, I want to try that one.
Okay.
And then as soon as I tasted it, I'm like, yep, we're good to go. It doesn't have that note. I don't need to taste any further.
Okay.
Right? Because, you don't want to wear out your palate.
Yep.
So once you find the one you like, but I had the biggest fear for a while after that. What if it was just that moment in time it didn't have that note?
Absolutely.
Right? But fortunately, it didn't. And so my narrative for that when I took the sample home to taste was, and I named it, so I named all my barrels. Every single one of my barrels has a name.
Okay.
It could be the taste profile, it could be a whole variety of things, whatever story that makes sense for me as to why I picked that barrel. So this one in particular is called the Antique. And so if you only had 5 minutes to spend with me, and you wanted an older whiskey that has some complexity and something you could enjoy, I would say, so I know we don't have time to taste, or if you come before noontime, you won't be able to taste.
Oh, okay.
I would have to tell you about this whiskey.
Gotcha.
So yes, and part of, I think, selling not just whiskey but anything is to be able to put your customer in that frame of mind where they can see themselves in that scene that you've created. Right? So in this one, it was called the Antique because I said, so just imagine you've just poured yourself an ounce of this, and you are sitting next to a fireplace in an overstuffed leather chair, and you're dusting off a hardcover classic, and somebody is smoking a pipe in the distance, and that is the experience you will get when you drink this whiskey.
Nice.
Would you not want to just take a few home already? So I mean, I don't tell that story but I feel like every whiskey I buy has a story.
Yeah.
And if you can't, for whatever reason, taste that day, I can at least describe to you the scenery of what I imagine when I drink that whiskey.
Yeah, I like that. It's a speeding up is often used poorly in whiskey terms, but it's a rapid creation of context for the drinker. I really like that idea. We've been talking about, you give somebody a 1/4 ounce pour or a 10 ml pour at a festival, and they go slam, and then they're on to the next table, and you'd have been just as well pouring that sample down the drain for all it achieved.
So I tell people when they come in the store, as soon as they do that, it's over. Because I have something below here that will be in the next 5 days. Because now you've just wasted my whiskey.
Right. So when did you start picking casks? And we've seen this rise in all stores having cask picks. Do you think it's a flooded market? Are you continuing to be careful with cask picks? Yes. What's that looking like for you?
So the first cask barrel that I got in my first store was actually a blend, which is kind of a cool story of how now we're coming full circle. It was an Angel's Envy blend.
Okay.
So then we went on to pick a Jack Daniel's single barrel, which very quickly I learned after that barrel pick that you need to take a sample with you, because I swear it was not the barrel I picked.
Oh, okay.
Because the third note that I don't like in whiskey, at least in American whiskey, is the banana note. It's perfectly fine in Irish whiskey or single malt Scotch or a blend of malt whiskey, but in a bourbon or a Tennessee style whiskey, it's not a note that I prefer.
Interesting.
So when they pop the cork, short distance away, I go, oh, no, that's not my barrel. So even back then, I didn't know that, that my nose, I mean, I always knew I smell all kinds of things, mostly annoying things, but I had no idea that I was able to kind of pick that note up, and I was like, yeah. So beyond that, I think I was in my first store, we probably picked a total of the 5-6 years I was there, about maybe 20-something barrels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
A notable one that really kicked off the whole multiple, actually two distilleries that I bought multiple barrels from. Was the first one was Whistle Pig, because I got to pick my first single barrel Whistle Pig with Dave Pickerel.
Okay.
And
there you
was
go.
such a privilege to have done that.
Very nice.
And then while he was around, I picked 3 barrels. 3 or 4 barrels, no, 3 barrels at least, while he was around. But then the big thing that kind of happened was with Garrison Brothers in 2017, I believe, when they were still relatively unknown. I remember tasting his whiskey up at the store in Massachusetts, and I was like, it's not there yet. And I do that a lot. I go, it's not there yet, but I can detect some greatness coming from this whiskey.
Yeah.
There's good quality, and it just needs time, right? Because even back then, people were still rushing to get this stuff out there, and I was like, it needs time. And this is coming from a person who has very little patience.
Okay.
but whiskey needs time. So I ended up buying 6 or 7 barrels of Garrison Brothers bourbon in Connecticut, helping put them on the map in Connecticut to a point where they go, who is this person in Connecticut, right? Because so after I bought my first 3 barrels and made such a big splash with it, that they sold 27 more barrels that last 2 quarters of the year.
Oh,
Which
wow.
was wild, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, not all because of me, but in part.
Sure.
Because nobody had tasted the whiskey before, and I said, hey guys, you guys know my palate. And so if you want to buy it now, you should you should pre-buy it, because there was one kind of backstory of how I wasn't allowed to buy the barrel. So I had to work around it. So I pre-sold it instead. Okay, this tastes so good. I'm not going to miss buying this barrel. So I pre-sold it, came out here and to Texas, and which is feels like a second home to me.
Wow.
In Austin. And every 29, the 15-gallon barrels, they're small. So there are only 29 bottles in that cask.
Oh, 29 bottles?
Yes, and it was
my
a hazmat, which kind of started the whole hazmat thing. And people just don't understand. I don't buy hazmats for hazmats. I buy barrels that taste good and happen to be hazmats.
So I've heard that term batted around for our listeners who are maybe overseas and not quite as familiar. We do talk about it a little bit within Scotch. For me, hazmat is over 70%.
Yes, yeah.
Is that the same?
Yes,
Are we
because
talking the
literally
same?
is hazardous to fly with.
Okay.
Right, because it will...
Okay, it really is a flammable condition
yes,
on it.
absolutely.
Okay, so it's not doing it just for the drama of having 70 plus.
No,
You
no.
are finding flavors and you're not finding it disappearing in the finish.
No, not at all. And it's similar to, when we hear of terms Navy strength, gins and rums, right? Because it's I think it's 50, is it 54? 57. 57 ABV is considered Navy strength, right? So it's at the point where if the rum or the gin were to fall on the gunpowder, it would still ignite.
Okay. Hence 57.1 being 100 British proof.
Exactly.
Boom. Oh, and my boom was, there we go. Okay, so there's a journey going on there in the cast selections. And there's being careful
Yes.
with what you're bringing in. What future do you see with cask picks?
So just going back a little
Yeah,
back,
please
back to how I ended up buying as many barrels and casks as I did. So because I was somewhat restricted in how many I could bring in at a time.
Is that a Connecticut thing?
No, it was my partnership.
Definitely not a Connecticut thing.
Trying to be diplomatic and the whole idea that you had to sell everything in that cask before you could bring a new one.
Okay.
Which doesn't make sense to me because it takes a while to get, once you select it, one takes a while to get it to you.
Yeah.
And sometimes when it's not ready, I'm going to keep it for a few months and then bottle it. But when I got my own store in October 2019, I felt free to buy one every 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh, Irene. Oh my
The
gosh.
first year I was there, I think I hit 26 barrels the first year and then just kept going.
Oh my gosh.
Because it was all delicious stuff and nobody told me I couldn't do it. And also, well, in all fairness, during the pandemic and everybody was,
right.
they would drink anything that tasted, good
Yeah.
or not even, right?
Yeah.
But in our case, I felt free to bring a lot of stuff in. I mean, all the uncertainty, I just felt like I just kind of saw this pattern of, man, we're going to be in lockdown for a while and we can't go to bars, we can't go out and have social events.
Yeah.
People are going to have to do this, over Zoom and all, which is what everybody did. So I bought a bunch of barrels, and all really, some sold out in, if we had online sales, it was sold out in seconds. If we had more than one phone line, it would have sold out in under an hour.
Oh my gosh.
But some of them would take, a month, a week, a year.
Okay.
And some I buy with the intention of keeping them around for a while, which is counterintuitive in business, right?
Yeah.
But the idea is I wanted to build a Disneyland or adult candy store. And you can't have one if you don't have enough supply, right?
Yeah.
So there's some candies that are very, they're something that you want as a staple, so to speak, right? So you can always come back to it. Because my customers come, and to put things in context, my store's in the middle of freaking nowhere. Right? So you really want to want to come to my store
Gotcha.
to get there,
Gotcha.
right? And some people live locally, locally I mean in Connecticut. Well, it's an hour and a half. I go, yeah, but this guy just drove all the way from California, and they're coming back next year.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So the idea of bringing something in and advertising it, on social media. I don't advertise. I put it on my social media, and then to have it disappear before somebody else somebody shows up to buy it. It's kind
Sure.
of disappointing.
Sure.
So I prefer to have a bunch of different, whiskeys around me all the time and at every price point. Right, which is why I love the Elijah Craig small batch. It's like a 40 and under that always tastes good, and you don't break the bank. And then at $50, $60, and then different categories of whiskeys. Right, so I like to have all the categories. Like the bourbons, ryes, high rye bourbons, single malt scotches, single malt whiskey from all over the world. Irish whiskey, which I've been kind of really digging lately, and so whatever your whiskey preference is. When you come in and tell me you don't like certain whiskey, it's a wonderful challenge for me. Especially when my Scotch drinkers, my single malt drinkers come in and they go, well, we only drink single malt Scotch. We don't like rye. I'm like, oh, really?
Absolutely.
And then they run home with a few bottles of rye, and I go, my job is done. In educating. So I guess maybe it's a different approach. People in a retail space, yes, of course we want to sell, we want to make money.
Yeah.
But by the same token, also, I feel like I want to educate, right? Because in my other life, I was a teacher for a few years before I came here to go to school. So I think I'm kind of also in that sense coming full circle and being able to teach, and not like I'm the authority on it, but it's to you learn by teaching and being educated by your customer.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I'm curious, and I definitely do want to get into the blending and how you got into blending, but just very quickly, you mentioned the pandemic there and things selling so easily.
Yep.
One of the things we're starting to hear in the US is retail and just focusing in whiskey or liquor sales. But retail is starting to slow down. Are you seeing that? Do you think that's
yes, absolutely
a hangover from the pandemic when people were loading up on bottles?
Part of that, actually, about 2 years ago, I had decided already. So this October, 5 years for. So the first 3 years, I pretty much bought a barrel every other week. But in November of 22, I made a promise to myself, at least, that the next year, not that I wasn't being discriminate about what I picked, but I was starting to find a lot of whiskey out there that was somewhat mediocre, right? Because everyone wanted to get into the business, so they were all sourcing whiskey. Don't get me wrong, I source whiskey myself.
Sourcing is not a crime.
Yeah, it's not a crime. I think it's a wonderful thing to, not have to wait forever. But by the same token, it has to be of a certain quality before it makes sense, right? So people just throwing stuff out there. Oh, it's 3 years old, it's 4 years old. Oh my God, it's 5 years old, and I can charge you, $200 for it. And so there was this kind of crazy escalation of, what's the next, what's the newest thing? Kind of like in craft beer.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I kind of already saw that might be coming because I myself was getting bored with just, picking, barrels. They were good, and some were better than others, but I was like, it's got to be better. And so it's a nice segue into the blending. And actually my blending had restarted in my story just pre-pandemic. I had blended my Whistlepick 15-year, which some Whistlepick people there today don't believe that I was allowed to blend there, but I did. And so it was kind of fun for me to blend it, 15-year cask strength Whistlepick, and to take that to another distillery and go, well, I can't blend your whiskey. Oh, Whistlepick let me blend. But I've gone way past that where I'm literally blending on the fly to say, hey, this whiskey single barrel sample you give me is really not good enough. Here, let me show you. I think this might taste better. And then they go, oh, okay, fine. Because the whole thing of it, because of where my store is and being in the middle of nowhere, that you really want to have to go there. So some places will go, well, hey, you don't carry our core products. And I'm like, have you seen my store? It's only 1,000 square feet, right? And every bottle for a spot on the shelf. In fact, they're kind of like, halfway into the back so you can see all the labels. And most bottles are too wide. I'm sorry, you're not good enough. You're going sideways. And I'm sorry if you don't have a side label, because then you'll never get sold. And once you're sold, we'll never bring you back until you make better whiskey. So I started blending for that reason. And so my promise to myself was all new things that I bring in, unless it was an exceptional single barrel, I was going to have a hand in making it or making decisions about it, right? So case in point, I have a barrel from unknown distilleries that I say, hey, this is really good, but I don't think it's ready yet. Can you put it in that cask? I mean, who gets to tell distilleries that, right? And which brings the point to me that I loved working with the smaller craft distilleries for that reason.
Yes.
Right, because they're way more flexible, and they're craft. They want to be creative and want to have options.
Absolutely.
Right? And for me to be able to showcase them too. And that was the other thing that I realized as I was buying single barrels from the smaller distilleries. And I always say, if you got good nose and palate, it's very easy to pick a good single barrel. It's like shooting fish in a barrel, literally, right? So by doing that, though, what I felt I was doing was kind of doing them a disservice, because now I'm taking the top 1% of their whiskey. And it's great. I already know I have a good skill in picking that, but it's not really helping them. So I feel like I'm robbing them of that top level of juice they could put into their core product to really showcase that, because I feel like that's where you make your money, is selling a really good core product.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So I said, well, if I just take, some of that and you let me blend with your other not as desirable barrels, and I can make something taste good out of that and make it way better than that barrel by itself, then now I have created an opportunity for you to use your top barrels, and assuming you can blend, to make your core products better.
That's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah.
On that blending side, there's something of, and I say this as Single Cask Nation, wearing my Single Cask Nation shirt, but there's something of a love affair with single casks and a single cask product. As you made that transition, and I'm sure you're still bringing in some single casks, it's not all blend, but as you started to make your blends and tell your stories, did you find any customers having less interest in a move from a single cask to a blend?
No. So my customers, the majority of the customers that enjoy my picks, they have developed a pretty sophisticated palate.
Okay.
And I've also been educating them that well, not my customers, but other people out there, they'll stay unnamed, distributors and other such people, importers, that a single cask, they confuse a single malt whiskey with a single cask.
Oh, okay.
Right? So when you tell them you would like to present them with a blend, they go, oh no, our customers in Europe, wherever else, they don't like blends. I was like, what are you talking about? They're drinking single malt whiskey, aren't they? Or are they only drinking single cask whiskey?
Yeah.
And I wish if somebody could shout that from the mountaintop so that the rest of the world will hear that and stop being confused. Because to me, it's annoying.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, you can't be that obtuse that you can't learn that.
I love it when the punchy side of you starts to come out. I really like that.
I told you I had no patience.
You're like, get your head out your ass.
Because I know, it just seems so logical to me, But yeah, so, and the whole thing of it is that, like I said, there are very few single casks that are that exceptional, right? I feel like the blends, and case in point with Compass Box, and coincidentally, I just met with James yesterday.
Sorry to miss him.
Yeah, and I've always admired what John Glaser's done with Compass Box,
Yep.
and I was like, why is not anybody else doing that? It makes so much more sense. I mean, the only difference between Compass Box and me trying to blend is they have way more access to much older whiskey than I do, and I'm just working with somewhat young stuff, but I'm working on that. But still, for me, it's great, a nice challenge to be able to make younger stuff taste way older.
So you are playing in the American sandbox?
Nope, I'm playing the world sandbox.
Ah, okay.
Why be restricted?
Right, and that was my follow-up, right? Okay, so you're pulling from other countries and bringing. So could you tell us some stories there, some examples of what you've
Sure.
been pulling around the globe?
So literally in the last 2 years, I've been all over the globe, and and also because some of the single casks I brought in from the rest of the world. So I brought in stuff from Australia from Starwood.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it, so I went out there to to play just this year actually in February, and then last year I was where was I last year? Last year I was in Finland with Kira Distillery.
There you go.
I have a barrel aged gin with them that is so amazing that was a cask. So yeah, if that's amazing, I'm buying that. And I also bought one of their rye that I really enjoy, and hopefully they'll have enough whiskey for me to play with in the blend in the future. Then I was in Scotland. Actually, I was in Kirkwall. That was not to pick any barrels. I can't afford anything from Orkney. I wish I could, but maybe someday. But it was kind of hang out to see what else people had out there. But the year previous to that was in Cork, Clonakilty.
Ah, okay.
So I was just trying to go back on to see when we started talking about that. I should maybe go and see what other whiskey they have. Oh, I know. That was when Colin Swolman from Kings County Distillery approached me and said, "Hey, why don't you go source some whiskey and make us some blends?"
That's wild.
Yeah, I was like, "Okay, what do you want me to make? Don't know, don't care. Just make it good." And at that point, I never considered myself an artist, but I was like, all of a sudden, I was like, damn, I got this blank canvas. Now I'm scared for a few moments because I wish there was a color on there to start with. But it's great. I love the challenge of make something happen. And
It's so wild. So I want to remind listeners that you started out this interview by saying there's still a day job at the heart of this. And then there's a store, and the store's not your day job.
it's my hobby.
Right. And now Kings County are sending you to make blends. And now you've added Crowded Barrel to your list of responsibilities.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about it? Well, talk to us about your success with Kings County. And then how did Crowded Barrel come on the scene?
Okay, so if you
It's wild talking to you.
It is.
Absolutely
if you
wild.
know me at all, you know I don't do things. Slowly. So, just to back to which I'm still a software consultant, been one for 39 years.
Gosh.
And when I started in the business, every night when I would get home from work after dinner, I would sit down and write software that nobody cared about, but stuff that I wanted to learn. I would, it was just this thing that I would do. So I started doing the same thing with whiskey, even before anybody even asked me to blend or whatever. I'd, get home from work, and this was when I had my first store, which I was spending a bit of time in, and I would do these blind tastings, and it was always a challenge. I'll get like 12 ryes and taste them all, and then write one note about each one, and then I would put all the glasses together. They were all marked, so I couldn't see them, and blind taste them. And the idea was to be able to pick out, just at one shot, that was all I gave myself, did I get it right, and put that glass back to the bottle. So I did that quite a bit for, as a training thing, because I don't have any mentors, right? I mean, I don't work in distilleries. I like to play in them. I don't work in them. But every distillery I go to visit, I listen to I ask questions, I listen to what they have to say, and, kind of put my own picture of how any of this makes sense. But yeah, so
It's so wild.
so the blending thing, actually even before Kings County approached me, I had already started to offer free services. Your first time is free. I just, so I went out to the distillery in Colorado Springs, and I liked what they did. That's how that relationship got started with Lock & Co. They were going to send 2 single barrels out of I think they were like 15 or 20 they had, to Connecticut to kind of bring their brand in. I said, well, if you're doing that, I think I need to come visit. Let me pick those 2 barrels. And so I did. And so I took all my notes and wrote everything I knew about those things. And then I was a year after that, so while I was there, I dumped one of the rye barrels into a Nebbiolo cask.
I'm not familiar with that.
It's
Nebbiolo?
Nebbiolo. It's an Italian grape cask. It's like
Okay.
like a Barolo. So anyway,
okay.
so we had this rye whiskey in a wine cask, which I knew was going to do well already just by that. And so a year after that, I went back and did the blend of that barrel and 2 other barrels. So that was kind of my first foray into,
Nice.
because I just thought it would be fun to do, right?
yeah.
Nobody paid me to do it. I didn't matter. That was my university education in whiskey blending. Yeah, I saw what opportunities were there for me to learn, and so I did that. And then of course, I started doing the blending for Kings County, sourcing the whiskey actually. But the reason I knew to go to Clonakilty to buy any whiskey at all was I already bought 3 casks from them, which I thoroughly enjoyed in a short amount of time. In less than like a year and a half, I think I bought 3 casks from them.
Oh.
And I really liked what they did. I didn't care that they were sourcing some of the whiskey while they were making their own. So I said, you guys have whiskey for me to buy in bulk? They're like, yeah, come over and visit. So I did. So I went there. I bought some whiskeys from my store. So I get to double dip, or now triple dip, when I go to the store to buy whiskey, right? So one is always to find an excellent single cask for my store, potentially. And 2, to, source whiskey for, 1 client, and then, 3 to source whiskey for another client, and whatever else. So I bought quite a bunch of whiskeys from them. And then I came back, and then what else did I blend for? A few others. So I've picked up a few other clients since. But
Okay.
we can speak of them later. But what was interesting story with the Clonakilty was there was a Sauternes cask, Chateau de Cam Sauternes cask,
Oh,
which
wow.
I was very impressed with.
Wow.
So I said, can I buy half that barrel for my store, and can I use the other half for my blending project? They're like, sure. So I brought a few other casks from them, and then wanted to buy the 15-year refill sherry butt from them. Half for my store and half, because in my mind, my first blend that I wanted to make for Kings County was going to be an Irish malt blend.
Okay.
And nothing else, because I love everything it did. And I felt like with the 15-year, I was going to get my finish and, and all of that. So I come back and, a few months later, they had trouble trying to get the whiskey to me. But in the meantime, somewhere along the way, they said, guess what? We don't want to sell you the 15-year for your project. We'll bottle it up, the one half, and then the other half gets sold to someone else.
Oh, okay.
So I was not too happy about that, because all of a sudden I'm like, somebody pulled the bottom out from underneath me, because now I'm going to have a whiskey that's not going to have a finish. This is even before I started blending. In my head, I already knew that I was going to have a whiskey that didn't have a finish. And so I was like, oh, damn, what am I going to do? So fortunately for me, my Virginia single malt, single barrel ex-bourbon cask had just come in.
Oh, nice.
And so I went over and I said, let me just blend these 3 together. I was like, holy crap, this is really good. So got on the phone with Virginia, and they said, I don't know. We don't know if we can sell you whiskey in bulk, because I've only bought 1 barrel from them, right? And they came back shortly after. They go, yes, when would you like to come? So fortunately, I think for me, that in that whole time, the build up to being able to buy whiskey in bulk was that I was really building up my reputation on picking all those single casks, right? And I didn't know that was providing me with this momentum of being able to and the clout to go to the store and go, hey, I want to buy this.
Yeah.
Show me what you have, right? Because
Yeah.
other people are going, how do you do that? I go, well, you buy 100 single barrels and then build a reputation, and they know that. So the biggest fear, I guess, we heard over the Independent Bottled Symposium, is that a lot of the stories are afraid of what you're going to do with that whiskey.
Yeah.
Right? They want to
Yeah.
protect their reputation. Well, guess what? I've already boosted their reputation before I went to see them,
Yeah.
or at least their competitors. So, of course, and it makes sense for them to want to play with me,
Yeah,
I think. I'm not sure, but I'm, conjecturing that's what's happening.
And that's certainly how we've always talked about it, right? Our spirit of collaboration. And obviously working with Amanda and Brian and Dustin and the team in Virginia down in
Yeah.
Livingston. Like, it's important to us to be able to represent that distillery going forward, only putting best foot forward.
Exactly.
And so to hear it as a successful blending component in something you're putting out, and then you're representing their name in what's going forward as well.
Oh yeah, so one of the things that I going back to Compass Box, I love their transparency,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I said, if I ever wanted to make a blend, I would definitely be 100% transparent about it. Even though the 2 blends I did for Kings County, it's the component blends are not on the side to say what but if you were to ask me, I would freely tell you.
Sure,
Right?
sure.
So I went down and to Virginia the first time, and I ended up. Amanda was going to be there that day, but she had pre-picked some barrels that she thought were good. And so I think I ended up buying 4 ex-bourbon casks. There was an STR cask. And I don't think the PX Sherry and the Oloroso were on there, but I go, hey, I recognize those casks. And so I bought those also.
Nice.
So now I have enough whiskey. So from Clown of Kilty, I had the Sauterne cask, I had the Marsala cask. What else did I have? I believe I had an Oloroso cask and the PX also. That's a lot of casks of
That
whiskey.
is a lot.
So I think it ended up total of about 15.
Okay.
And so the idea was to kind of put this blend out for Kings County in the course of 3 years.
Okay. I was curious about that part.
Yeah. So that was the initial plan anyway.
Okay.
But since I never do things slowly, so they were like, well, so you're going to store them all together? I'm like, no. In my mind, I already knew I had to make 3 blends, right? Not because it was 15 barrels, but it makes sense for the profile of each cask that I picked. There was something outstanding about it that I would take note of. Only one note.
Okay.
I hate to confuse it with, yes, it's all these other notes I don't care about. What's the one outstanding thing about that cask?
Could you give us an example of that? Like, would it be buried? Would it be robust? Like,
Yes.
what is it you're going for?
So, a common example I like to use is the Virginia STR cask. It is such a distinguishing mark for me, a note that I can recognize it blindfolded 5 miles away. The wind was blowing just right. It's got this red berry note that is so outstanding. And that I can pick it out, pretty much anywhere. Or let's see, what else is, like in certain port casks, there's just a certain kind of a raisiny note, a raisin that resonates with me, not with anybody else. It doesn't matter. So it's whatever that note is. Or there's something that is always spicy only on the left side of my palate.
Okay.
So I get the it's how I blend. It's a map that I've drawn on I call it my tasting doodle. So I put all of that in a spreadsheet and I score the whiskeys and all of that. And then when I go to, make the recipe for my blend, I go that and that's going to go together.
Yeah.
What proportion, I don't know. But one of them is always a base, right? The whiskey that's going to tie it all together. And then there's the nose aroma component that I would like to add to the blend. And then there's one that always has to have the finish, right? It doesn't have, not that it's going to provide long finish because the base should provide a lot of that already. But the finish that with a little extra surprise, which in the first King's Code, the Kings County project that I created, has the Sauterne cask in the back. Right, because the Sauterne is also very, very aggressive. She wants to be the queen, the star of the show. And like, oh no, I need to smack you tomorrow. First, I started with like 30%, and she was way too aggressive. So I dialed it back to 18%. It was just perfect.
Wow!
So that you got some of those delicate peach and nectarine notes in the back.
Sure.
And if you ask me how did I know it was going to do that, well, I can say I don't, but I do. Right, because I picked the components for that reason as to where I want them to show up. Unfortunately, they behaved.
One of the questions I've always got for blenders is you think your blend's going in the right direction, and you think if I just add one more little bit of this, you're already reacting.
Yes.
If you just add one more little bit of this, it'll be there, and sometimes it throws it out of balance.
Exactly.
Have you learned along the way with experience here? Sometimes pulling back will be better than adding a little bit more of X.
So as I make start my blending journey, in the same way that I'm starting to make gins, I'd like to keep the components very, very simple, right? Because more doesn't mean better, right? If you can make a beautiful painting with just 3 colors, your life is so much easier, and I feel like it becomes much more elegant that way. So that's my approach to blending. Is if I could get away with just 2.
Oh wow!
And some people go, well, 2 is just easy. Well, no, not really, because 2 in the wrong proportions sucks.
Yeah.
But 3 seems to be, I get it to maybe 5 at the most right now. But I think 3 to 4 seems to be, because it gives you kind of a better idea of where those accents need to be.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like building a house, right? You need to have a good foundation. And then you can't, then you have to pick a style of windows and doors. You can't mix and match those. You can't have, like a colonial style door and then some modern, Frank, Lloyd's, window style, right?
Yeah. That's
So I
interesting.
think this is kind of same approach. And the same thing when I make a gin, right? The few of the botanicals to be able to showcase what you want to showcase, and I think that's kind of, I feel like it shows off your skills better.
You
can
go.
make just only 3 things and have it present as well so elegantly.
So interesting. Okay, so I'm conscious of time here. I cannot tell you how much I'm enjoying this conversation. This has been a long time coming, and I'm so happy to have had this conversation now. But we're sitting here in Austin. We're at Crowded Barrel, and you make a joke about wearing cargo pants because you can fit sample bottles in the pockets.
That's what they're made for.
And you're always pulling out samples here and samples there. Are we able to talk about the 2 samples that you've been showing in the
Yes.
last couple of days?
Sure.
Because I know there's Virginia in there as well,
Yes.
and it seems
Yep.
like a nice connective point here.
So the cargo
She taps her
shorts
pocket.
with those sample bottles is actually what got me into. It didn't get me into it. They already knew that I kind of know what I know at the Crowded Barrel. You asked a question before about how they became one of my clients. It's last year when I was here at the Bassett Ball. I think Rex was. I was like, "Here, I was pulling samples. Okay, taste this. Yeah, taste this." Because I just started, to do some of my other blends, and all of a sudden the light bulb went on. He's like, "We need to talk." I go, "Okay, I know I got your number, but give me a number. I want to talk to you." So the following week, he gives me a call and he's like, "So what are your dreams and aspirations?" I was like, "Oh man, it's too early in the morning to ask me those questions. I don't plan that far ahead." But long story short, they said, it makes sense that you should be our blender, since Daniel's been stepping out to just manage the nonprofit side of the school of the Whisk Academy, and I was like, all right, I think I can do that, so the idea was to basically have me be the spirit hunter, so to go out in the world and same thing, what do you want us to make? And we kid about it. Now he's like, so we were supposed to do 1 blend every quarter, and because we didn't, we didn't restrict you. I said, what are you making? How much? He didn't give me a budget, so I just went out and bought stuff. Literally, I was like, when do I start? 2 days from now, and within a month, I was down in Virginia buying all kinds of barrels and casks of whiskey. And then while I was here, I was speaking to one of our whiskey somms, Chris Plunkett, which every time I talk about him, I forget his name, but he's very important. He's one of my whiskey somms. And so he lives in Arizona and he knows about Del Bach. And so I got into a conversation with Del Bach. And so they're in, the 2 blends are only made of 6 casks of whiskey.
Okay, and 6 casks, 2 distilleries.
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
wow. And so what are you finding each lot of casks bringing to that table?
So Del Bach is mostly known for their mesquite smoked whiskey, but they also have unsmoked. So I go, that was a perfect way. So the idea of doing these blending projects for the Crowded Barrel is to showcase every distillery, right? That and to kind of help tell their story, and why? Because I picked them was because they make good stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what a perfect way to showcase Del Bach by going smoked and unsmoked.
Yeah.
Right. And with the Virginia component, so with the smoked, which is Cerberus, the 3-headed, monster, so to speak, a beast, there was 20% of smoked, the mesquite smoked from Del Bach. And the other 2 components were the STR cask for the nose, the port cask, the John Deere's port cask, which had this full palate, and I wanted the smoke from Del Bach to show up in the back.
There you go.
And that came up so beautiful. It's as if you were having liquid barbecue. So I said, we should maybe do a food pairing thing. So we're going to pair it with burnt ends and beef briskets when we launch the brands here on June 8th. And the second blend with the unsmoked, a little more delicate. I blended that with 40% each of the 2 sherry casks from Virginia.
Okay.
It was a Fino sherry,
Oh, wow.
and it was one of the best Fino sherry casks I've ever tried. Because not a lot of people do Fino cask well, right? Because Fino is kind of finicky. It has its own style that it wants to impose on whatever.
Yeah.
But Virginia, I have to say, they do a really amazing American single malt.
They do.
Definitely on the East Coast. Dare I say, almost in the country. That with the Oloroso, I'm not sure how the magic happened, but it for me it was like blueberry cobbler.
Whoa.
Pastry notes.
Oh,
like
I
every
love
time I smell
pastry
it,
notes.
I go, look at that beautiful blueberry. Somebody goes, it's brambleberry boysenberry. I'm like, nope, it's blueberry for me. But yes, so those things I try not to be like. It smells just like this.
Yes.
Because we all have different memories of what
Yes.
we eat and what we smell and taste and identify. But for me, because it's my blend, I'm going to say it's blueberry. So we're going to pair it with a blueberry cobbler.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I love blueberry cobbler as well.
So it should be really fun. I hope people who can make it out here on campus will do that, because one of the first things we're going to do actually at 11 o'clock in the morning, 11:30, is for a VIP session. I've had them save a bottle of each of the 6 components.
Smart.
And we're going to label them 1 to 6. And then you know the final answer because I'm giving it to you. So you get to taste the 2 final answers. And your job, or your exercise today, is to recreate my blends.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So
That's
it's great. It's really,
wonderful.
Rex was kidding about, well, if they do that right, then you kind of put yourself out of a job. I'm like, that's okay. There are other jobs out there for blending.
And you've got so many jobs. Quick question for you. As you're blending, as you're exploring those flavors, textures, finishes, do you move up and down in strength? Do you add water to it, or is it all natural cask strength?
It's all natural cask strength, because
Okay.
my belief has always been that I would like the customer to have the experience of, if they only drink whiskey by dropping a rock in it, then do that, right? But if I've decided that, no, I'm going to expand how much I can sell and all that, it's not about that. For me, it's always quality over quantity. I'd rather have 1 glass
Yeah.
than a jug of so-so stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
so they can drop that rock in it and then taste it over the course of an hour and see that whiskey evolve, right? And I think that, because it should be a journey. It should really relish. I mean, how lucky we are that we get to drink good whiskey. So why are we going to rush through it, right? Why don't we sit and enjoy? Yeah, much more enjoyable with friends. But, if you've had a rough day and you want to just relax and you want to do that, and it just makes you kind of contemplate, I think, when you have a good whiskey. Certainly, and sharing that with friends makes it 10 times more enjoyable, because we all have different experiences with the whiskey, and it's good to have this discussion of what we're drinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and then finding additional components as listening to other people and other people's experiences, as you just said a moment ago. People sharing their memories of taste is so cool and an aspect I love.
It kind of makes it every step of the way with storytelling.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, I mean, people have all kinds of different conversations, but I feel like we kind of build community around storytelling. And to me, to be able to have whiskey do that, it's just amazing. It's a privilege to be able to do that, to be able to work with whiskey and help build community.
100%, and that's from a software engineer, store owner, cask picker, blender, world traveler, and somebody who just gave us an hour of her time. Thank you so much, Irene.
It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Listening back to that conversation, what I liked about it is much of what she had said was actually quite familiar to me, because unlike yourself, this was your first time meeting her. I've known her for years. I've known her for 6 or 7 years, and I've got to, I've got to be on the sidelines as she's evolved into what she does now, right? From being the spirits curator at one store and then jumping ship and starting her own store and focusing on
Absolutely.
right on barrel picks and then starting to get into blending. And so it's just nice to be able to hear that fuller story in a smaller 55-minute clip or so, you know. But I basically got to experience the last 6 or 7 years of me knowing her in 55 minutes, which was super cool. And it was true to her, and it was true to who she is and what she does. And it intrigued me as well that she does talk about this as a hobby, but it's more than that, because she's putting her heart and soul into it and a ton of money. Being in the liquor industry is not inexpensive, especially being a retailer who's in charge of bringing in barrel picks and bringing in that full barrel and then slowly selling it out. That means you're sitting on a lot of money. So to talk about this as just a hobby, I agree with you. I don't think that that's necessarily a fair assessment of what she does. And it's clear she's very serious and very passionate about this quote-unquote hobby.
Yeah, cheers. I'm excited to get to Canterbury Liquor in the future and see this destination retail store with my own two eyes, and inevitably come out with bottles purchased.
Oh, yeah. Bring a suitcase.
Back to Virginia.
Fill your boots.
Yeah, cheers, Irene. Thank you for your good company and for sitting down to get you on wax. It was a pleasure.
Jason, a while back, maybe 3 episodes ago or so, you and I were talking with Chris Riesbeck.
Yeah, episode 6 of this season.
Oh, was it episode 6? And this is episode 11, so that's 5 episodes ago.
Look at that.
Man,
we're walking into the future.
There you go. Yeah, well, you know, one of the things that we had discussed, I don't know if it made it to the final episodes, but we definitely discussed it amongst the 3 of us, was Found North, the company he's now with, who focuses on Canadian spirits. We're launching a new product called Helldiver. And we now have samples of Helldiver in hand. I have some in my glass, and I thought it would be good, or we have some in our glass, I should say. And I thought it would be good for us to taste through this. But before we taste through this, I want to go into what this whiskey is, and they lay it out on the label.
Yeah, you're doing the same as me right now. I can see you looking at your label, and I'm sitting here reading through my label. And I think this, again, fits perfectly with having Irene on today's episode.
Yeah.
Right? We're not talking single cask here. We're talking
Blending.
a curated batch here, particular flavors living with other flavors. So, yeah, please let the listener know what we've got here.
So, again, Found North focuses on Canadian spirits, and it's good to keep in mind, and this is a broad brush statement, but in Canada, the tradition is they distill a single grain at a time, meaning when they want to create something that has multiple grains in it, they'll have corn distillate, they'll have rye distillate, they'll have barley distillate, they'll have millet distillate, so on and so forth, matured separately and individually, and then at the end of the maturation process, they marry it together for that final product. So with Helldiver, you're looking at, for grains, 85% of this is a corn distillate, 14% of this is a rye distillate, and 1% of this is a barley distillate. And it doesn't talk about the initial maturation cask, but it does talk about 3 different finishing casks, which are sherry, though it doesn't say what kind of sherry. Cognac doesn't say the producer, but that's okay. And then NW, which I imagine stands for New Wood. That's my
assumption.
guess, yeah. And
I think Uma Thurman is safe.
Uma Thurman is safe.
You know what happens when you assume.
Make an ass out of Uma Thurman. That's true.
And I think in this instance, she's totally safe.
And we're looking at 59.5% alcohol. This is 15
good strength
years.
on that.
Yeah, good strength. Aged a minimum of 15 years. And I have it in my glass. Have you been nosing yours, Jason?
I have indeed. Yeah, lovely, lovely nose to it. That opportunity to sit and explore those grains. The question we're always asking, what's the corn doing? What's the rye doing? What's the barley bringing to the party, even in that very small percentage? But then also, what's the wood doing, right? You know, we're starting to see a little bit of cognac finishing, a little bit of cognac maturation out and about in the world. And I quite like what cognac is bringing.
Agreed.
Anytime I see cognac, I think of Glenmurray.
Yeah, it's fun. I think of Glenmurray. I think of M&H as well. They had an Apex cognac cask, which I think, made for a really fruity yet wonderfully dry whiskey. When I nose this, I'm getting some of that cognac coming through, but I also wonder as well, and this is one of the things that we don't necessarily know, is the distillation style. Is this continuous column distillation, right? Is this pot still distillation? And I don't know off the top of my head, or don't remember off the top of my head.
So I have the specs sheet in front of me from Found North.
You're so much better than I am. I just have the bottle, and I'm like, okay, this is the information. I forgot they sent a spec sheet, so thank you, Jason.
Well, prior to what you were saying there about it only saying sherry on the label, in the spec sheet it does tell us that it's Pedro Jimenez sherry casks,
Okay.
French oak cognac casks,
Checks out.
and New American white oak casks.
White oak.
And those are used to finish the blend as it was made. As much as the label says aged 15 years, they have gone the path of the youngest whiskey in the batch. I can tell you there's 15-year-old corn, 22-year-old corn, 23-year-old corn, and then 18-year-old rye and 19-year-old rye.
So are you saying then, because you had said that they're putting the blend into these casks, so as you're reading it, are they basically taking these three distillate types, the three grain types, blending them together and then putting them into these finishing casks, the PX sherry, the cognac, and then the new charred oak? Is that how you're reading it?
Let me give you their statement from the spec sheet here. This is in the high altitude collection. And so this collection only includes whiskies that share our creation philosophy of blend, finish, blend, where we create an initial blend, recask, and age the entire blend into specific finishing barrels, and then remarry the final whiskey.
There you go.
There's then an interesting bit a little on. So we reblended a selection of those finishing casks to create Helldiver First Flight. For the sake of balance, we only use 2/3 of the finishing casks in the final blend. So almost a little Solera system going on.
Yeah, I mean, Solera system, it reminds me of, Black Tot's remit for their annual Master Blenders Reserve, right? Where they always hold back 1/3. And then they use that third that they've held back to create the next release as the base, right? And so,
right.
Yeah. So okay,
yeah, I like that DNA.
Yeah, there you go.
I only throw that out there to annoy Dr. Matt Bishop.
Oh man, he just drove off the road.
Yeah, how dare you wish me a happy birthday? Let me put this back in your face. So here's the thing. So I'm busy reading the spec sheet. I'm only half paying attention. I'm not even half paying attention to the whiskey. I'm only a quarter paying attention to the whiskey. I am closing the spec sheet.
Good.
So I've answered all questions. I have presented the information that I see fit, and I am closing the spec sheet. For those who are listening closely, I'm pleased to tell you it was a PDF.
So as you were going through that, and as we've been going along, I've been nosing it. And like I said, I definitely got the cognac cask influence, and then my nasal passages sort of changed gears, and I started discovering some of that oakiness coming through. Initially it was in the background, and now it's very much in the foreground. I'm not getting much sherry on the nose. One of the things I'm looking for and struggling to find, but it could be simply because, my knowledge of Canadian whiskey is a bit lacking, is I'm trying to understand the notes from the grain themselves, right, from the grains themselves. And I'm not getting that. Right now I'm getting oak, which is quite pleasant, but I'm not getting the grains yet. I'm going to go ahead and taste it. Looks like you've tasted some just now.
Yeah, I definitely get this spice from the rye. And I think, as you and I have discussed in some of our June 6th releases, our celebration of American spirits,
Oh, shit.
you are looking for this balance between the wood, the oak spice, and the rye, and a rye spice.
Yeah.
And I think here I get something that is spicy and drying. And then I think I get the sherry coming in being quite juicy behind that. I think there's an evolution to the casks that are operating here.
Oh, wow. That discovery of rye is spot on, and I would argue that it's not a discovery. Like, despite it being 14% in the blend, I feel as if it's taking the steering wheel a little bit with that rye presence in a very good way.
Which then is to your point about what is 85% corn bringing to this party. And I would be looking for buttered popcorn or vanilla or caramel. And I think the rye is certainly a spicier presence than those perhaps warmer, rounder flavors from the corn. And I wonder if 85% corn is actually doing some framing in here, right?
Yeah.
Is corn the pedestal on which the rye sits?
There you go. Yeah.
And then when you taste it, you go, there's the rye. There's the rye on its pedestal. The corn is just happily holding it up for inspection. There is a note. I know you're exploring this right now on your palate. There is a note for me on the nose that's a little bit lavender. And I was asking myself where that might be coming from, and could some of the cognac be presenting something that takes lavender form?
So I'm glad you said lavender, because it was a note that I was finding on the palate just then. Just before you said, I said, there's something quite floral here. And then you nailed it with the lavender. Subsequent sips started to reveal that corn a bit. There's more of a delicate sweetness coming through. I'm getting some of that, corn specific sweetness, some delicate popcorn in there. Hints of candy necklace, which I don't know if that's coming from a combination of the cognac mixed with the PX sherry, but a little bit of that candy necklace bright sweetness coming through. You know what it kind of reminds me of? Like a more balanced version of the early Whistle Pig releases. I don't know if you followed Whistle Pig from early days where it was 100% Alberta rye. It was like, hi guys, this is Alberta rye. Good luck with your palate. Like it was excellent, but it was singular. Where this is saying, okay, we got that, but now we've evolved a little bit, and that's not me saying bad things about whistle pig,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
but
I know
this
you're
is
not.
sort of taking that cue and saying, but what if we did stuff with other Canadian spirits, right? And with different cask maturations, right? This is really nicely put together on the palate. I haven't gone back to the nose yet. I'm going back to the nose just now.
Yeah, I did something that I don't normally do, but I'm trying to be a little bit better of it in the name of exploration. Is I actually added a few drops of water to this. Right? Partly because of the question you're asking about corn and where's the corn. The rye, I'm seeing the rye. I'm getting the rye. The new charred oak, I'm seeing the new charred oak. I'm getting that quite forcefully. And at 59.5, I'm kind of like, I wonder if a little bit of water brings that corn out a little bit more. I wonder if it presents a softer side. I wonder if it tames the new charred oak, if it tames a little bit of the rye spice.
I think so. I've just done.
I tell you what it does do. It brings the lavender out on the nose.
So thank you. So I was just going to say, I added 4 drops of water to what I have in my glass here, which is maybe a half an ounce left, something like that, and it brought out some of the lavender, and it calmed some of the oak down, and it brought out some of this a creaminess on the nose, which is quite nice.
And a matching creaminess on the palate.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a softer experience with the water in it. I ran into this last night. I was dramming with some friends who don't always go the cask strength route. There may be people who like a bourbon over a cube.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when I bring out the single cask nation stuff, I immediately start fielding that's a lot, right? and you go, okay, well, let's explore what a lot means in this instance. And so with them in mind, I think of people who would have Canadian with a cube or would have a rye spice with a cube. Yeah. And I think at 59.5, you and I clearly stand behind this. It has been our business model for 13 years. I love putting out that cask strength release for the consumer to experience at that strength. I also love the opportunity to explore it with a drop of water. And I think with that little bit of water to it, I think I have better access to the casks and the grains that are happening in that offering. And that becomes dangerously quaffable with a drop or 3 of water.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I know, so firstly, very well said. Secondly, what I noticed with the drops of water is, the initial nosing of this, the initial tasting of this, I was able to say, there's the new charred oak. Nice. Oh, there's the cognac there. Nice. Ooh, little hint of PX there. Nice, right? Oh, there's the rye, right? And so on. And adding the drops of water, those differences have become less discernible, and this has
100%.
just become balanced and complete. Not to say that it wasn't balanced before, but it's meshed, like it's zwooged together, right? It's like the difference between making a great cocktail with great components, and then you put that final shake to it, and now it's that final thing, right? Just needed a few drops of water for my palate.
Coming in at $160, approximately 2,200 bottles. As I said previously, I closed the spec sheet and it had both of those pieces of information on it.
There you go.
But I know that we're in that ballpark. Yeah, definitely. If you're the type of person that likes a glass of whiskey with a cube or a glass of whiskey with a drop of water, absolutely.
Yeah,
I would recommend this highly. Always worth exploring it. The full strength as it comes out of the bottle, make it fit your palate. You said that a second ago.
Yeah.
To my palate.
Yep.
Right? Make it fit your palate. Yeah, that's a lovely older whiskey that really sits well on the palate with a little bit of water in it.
And further proves that, there's great whiskey being produced and coming out of Canada. And my hope is that other producers sort of follow suit with Found North, and those earlier days with Whistle Pig when they were focused on Canadian rye, and there are a few other brands as well that are really taking those Canadian spirits and maximizing the flavors that can come from them. So keep your eye on Canada, keep your eye on Found North. Just for full disclosure, we did receive these samples as freebies. Our opinions are our own. It just so happens that we really like it.
Yeah, cheers to Chris for making sure those got to us.
Yep.
It was nice to revisit. And again, I've said it to him over text, but the feedback from his episode has been tremendous.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely tremendous.
Yep.
He is an industry guy through and through and has worked multiple corners of this industry. And so, yeah, if you're just tuning in now, I recommend going back. Season 8, Episode 6. Have a listen to the Chris Riesbeck interview. Really, really terrific.
Could not agree more. I mean, I could, but I won't.
Man, your head would fall off your neck if you agreed anymore.
So, Jason, we really don't have much news to share, at least for this episode. So, no need to call the paperboy.
Yeah, I would just remind people, singlecastnation.com has a shop. And in that shop, we have bottles. And you can order those bottles anytime you so wish. Running a little low, some of the stock from June 6th, which is lovely to see, but still opportunities to grab it. Please go forth. And it's interesting, as I'm out and about and I'm talking to people, I'm seeing people go to the front page, singlecastnation.com. There's a few bundles on the front page. And they're saying, I'm not seeing that bottle I was looking for. I'm not seeing that bottle that I wanted. And I'm saying to people, click on shop. Go into the shop. We don't have every bottle available on the front page.
Correct.
Click through on shop. Have a look at the other bundles that are there. Have a look at the bottles that are there. So please do. We've got delicious offerings on there. And it's great. It's another thing I'm hearing from people, right? That idea of curation. Like, what should I be drinking? What American single malts are you recommending? What American non-Kentucky bourbons are you recommending? Like, go to our shop. You'll see exactly what we're recommending. So please, go forth. Purchase delicious things and enjoy your summer with spirits. Maybe with cubes. Maybe with drops of water. Maybe in cocktails. Have fun with it.
I would say go forth and buy a fifth. Hey. All right, Jason. Final thing. I
got to go on vacation. And by the time people hear this, I will still be on vacation. How wonderful is that?
Before we get out of here, if you want to be like Nick Frangipane and want to reach out to us, info@singlecastnation.com. If you liked this podcast, please go ahead, tell your friends. You can rate us not just on Apple Podcasts, but apparently you can rate us on Spotify as well.
Ooh.
So if you don't have an Apple Music account, if you don't have an iPhone and you can't rate us, well, everybody's got access to Spotify. You can go to Spotify and you can rate us there.
If we start getting Spotify ratings, do we get some of that sweet, sweet Joe Rogan money?
We get all the sweet, sweet Joe Rogan money.
Oh, man. Oh, I cannot wait for the sweet, sweet Joe Rogan money.
And on that note, I bid you and the listener and Irene Tan, thank you again, adieu.
Adieu.